Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Happy Wednesday or Thursday, depending on where you may be joining from or if you watch it in a recorded session. Uh, this is our fifth session this year as the Data Matters Global community. And I'm really excited that Sam is here today to talk about Salesforce MnA integration framework, especially these days because economic conditions, whether it is for growth or constraints, mean companies are always looking for synergies. They are looking at consolidation of either existing orgs across lines of business, or we are observing mergers, acquisitions as companies want to be more efficient. And Sam, hearing from your experience is going to be wonderful. Just want to go through a few brief announcements before turning it over to you. First, thank you for joining us live. We exist for the community members. The events are organized by community members. We appreciate your taking the time to join us today, whenever today happens to be. My name is Mehmet Orhan. I am the North America Community Group Leader for Data Matters Community. Angelica is our LATAM lead, Stewart in EMEA, and Vlad in APAC. Regardless of where you're joining us from, and we do publish these recordings as part of our YouTube channel, feel free to reach out to us if you want to present, if you want to see a topic, and we will do what we can to make it happen. Just want to reflect on last week was New York World Tour. There are events happening globally. This is a photo from a practitioner-led data cloud enablement workshop that we held at Salesforce Tower. One of the things that is essential is we have some proven techniques, just like what Sam is going to talk about. There are also new technologies where um, I love Trailhead, and learning synthetic scenarios go only so far by having real practitioners. I see Anu and Angelica on the photo share how to and how not to use technology. We all learn from each other. Speaking of, we are going to have a series of sessions in London and in Melbourne in the month of June. In London, myself and Angelica are participating in a number of sessions, and we look forward to meeting other data architects, data analysts, consultants that are passionate about data. Here are the event highlights. And we will likely announce a community meetup at TDX London just to see who else is there so we can continue to foster community. Then at the end of June, we are going to come to Melbourne. Vlad is organizing a data cloud workshop in the NZ community on June 24th. And we are also looking at a potential meetup for World Tour Melbourne and maybe a session or two as that session agenda gets finalized. With that said, uh, I would like to introduce Sam, or actually, you do a much better job introducing yourself, and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let me see. Let me share my screen. So as Moment mentioned, I'll be speaking on Salesforce MnA, which, as he mentioned, is a critical area. So this is a picture of me. I got a professional headshot when I joined Equifax, I think 15 years ago, and I haven't updated my professional headshot since 15 years ago. So as you may notice, I have my widow's peak has gotten significantly higher since then, but I am very, very happy to be here. So in my current role, I'm a product owner at Salesforce. Just to give you a little bit more background, we went live on Salesforce in the summer of 2019. And since then, I've done a little bit of everything. I went through the implementation process for Salesforce, sat in a room with an architect for a year, and just absorbed everything I could about how the platform works, how the data model works, how objects work, profiles, permission sets. It was overwhelming, but also one of the most enriching experiences of my life from the learning perspective. So since then, when we went live, I was an admin. I built reports. I supported data loads. I was a business analyst. I kind of wore a lot of different hats, but in my current capacity, my official title is product owner. So I view myself as the go between our development teams and our business stakeholders to make sure that everything is functioning well and properly. I have 7 Salesforce certifications at this point. I'm hoping to continue to expand that as time goes on. And one of my philosophies is open conversations and transparency. I know that, especially with M&A, it's a very sensitive topic because you're dealing with a lot of people who are going through a major change management experience. They may be scared, they may be happy, they may be nervous. So you want to make sure that they feel heard and validated and supported and all of that. So one of my phrases is that my goal is always to stop things from becoming things. We've all been there. You're in a bad meeting. You go to talk to somebody else about how frustrated you are about the meeting. Then they repeat that frustration to somebody else, and it can create a toxic work environment where people feel like they don't have a voice. So I always tell everybody, we're going to stop things from becoming things. If you need to say something, let's have a environment where you feel like you can say something. So when I'm not stopping things from becoming things, I love to bake and read with my family. I made homemade cinnamon coats scones on Sunday and homemade creme brulee. So I was happy as a clam. And then I read books with my kids. So it was a great Memorial Day weekend. So for the presentation today, I wanted to start with why are we here? Set the stage for the conversation. Talk about what does it mean to you? What are you going to do about it? And then what next? So throughout this presentation, we're going to cover it. So why are we here? M&A deals happen all the time. Salesforce literally just announced one yesterday. And as the reason that I feel like we've been able to handle M&A well is that you want to understand what is your company hoping to get out of it, right? Because if you can understand the purpose and the goal that people are looking to achieve, you can find the best way to work together. And the company bought another company because they want to get value out of it, right? You want to expand your customer base. You want to be able to sell your services to an additional customers or sell your current customers what the other company was selling. And how do you make sure that you get that value out of it? You take care of the people and you take care of the clients because you want the clients to come and stay happy and buy more services. And you want to make sure that the employees who are the heart of the company stay and bring their knowledge and their talent to your new organization as well. So throughout this whole process, I always kind of had that in mind. Make sure that customers feel taken care of, make sure that employees feel taken care of. So as part of that, we always talk about lead to cash, right? Someone comes in the door, says they want to buy their services, they go through the selling process, they contract with you, sometimes they need support, and ultimately they need to pay for those services. And that's where CRM plays a component in it. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is tying that CRM, Salesforce, into kind of that lead to cash ecosystem and looking at it holistically from the data perspective, because as we all know, data matters. Because if you look at it cohesively, you make sure that employees can work together, clients get the support they need, they get billed properly. Nobody likes when a bill's wrong. I will call the company the second I get a bad bill, and I know that it's painful for everyone to unwind those. And we also want to make sure that they're excited about the acquisition and they want to take advantage of the new service offerings that you can offer as part of that. So what does this mean to you? So I don't know exactly how to do a show of hands, but maybe if you can kind of put in the chat if you've ever had your company buy another company, been acquired yourself, and if you have, what the experience was like. I did this conversation previously, and some individuals shared that it was a painful experience. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what's happening next. Yes, I see a raised hand. I like that function.
Albrecht, I can tell a story. So I was an exception. I think this is when Roche Pharmaceuticals acquired Genentech. They used to have the mistake And we went through a fascinating week many years ago of all of the functional and technology leaders were brought into a conference room for about a week. None of us knew who was going to have a job and ownership at the end of that week, but we were asked to come up with the best recommendations on how to integrate processes and functions together so we can be effective in how we engaged the target customers, which was the physicians, so we can get cancer drugs to market. What made the process fascinating is because we were focused on the outcome and the mission, the conversations were fact-based, and we ended up with a hybrid architecture. It wasn't just one player's technology or another, but we all needed to back why we were making the recommendation, and that also created a fairly strong team culture that we needed to maintain regardless of who had a 12-month duration as opposed to long term, because we understood where each other were coming from. And a decade later, I'm still in touch with most of those people today.
That's great. Charles, I saw you raise your hand and then you went back on mute. If you'd like to share something, great, but don't feel any pressure to either. All right, let me check the chat. Okay. Yeah, I think what's interesting about MnA in our case is that we know the end state, right? Our company had a standard tech stack, we had a standard method of working, and our goal was to move the acquired company into that process flow to create consistency across the entire user base. And there's kind of two different ways of taking it. Like you said, it can be collaborative where you're working together, where it's a real positive environment where they embrace change and they embrace adoption, and we learn from each other on improving the procedures. The people who did that, I'm still working with today. They were able to come into Equifax with open arms. There were other people who held on tight to their current procedures and weren't willing to learn and adapt, and they tend to no longer be with the company because of that. And it's interesting to see because I think this lead to cash migration plays such a crucial role because it literally touches so many different areas of the company, right? The sales team uses a CRM that is used by it. Your customers may need service team. So how is the service team going to take care of them? And that's a lot of what we'll be talking about today. And I think where I kind of had an aha moment in this whole process is understanding that an MnA CRM migration must be looked at as a full implementation. This isn't a, lift and shift or just shove it in there. If you want to do it right and well, you need to view it as a full implementation where you start from the very beginning. We're starting with business requirements. Hey, how does your system work? What data do you enter? How is it managed? What downstream systems does it feed? What users, what do they need to do in the system? What system changes do we need? What custom things have you done that we need to make sure that we can offer you the same level of functionality? You need to get the data into there and then also make sure that they know how to use the new tools once they're in there. And understanding that and kind of pitching it internally as that is what helped me to get buy-in and make sure that we had the time and space to do the work. When I gave this presentation previously at the fantastic Dreaming and Data Conference in St. Louis, Missouri, one of the individuals at the presentation said that she had like 2 months to move people in. They're trying to fly everybody in for training, and she hasn't had time to prepare anything. And I felt heartbroken for her because that's a terrible experience for her and for all the people using the system because it's not going to work to meet their needs. So that's why at the very bottom, transparency, empathy, kindness, which goes to the MnA migration North Stars. So whenever I kicked off a project, before I did anything else, I pulled up this slide and I said, welcome to Equifax. We're glad you're here. We're going to be working together on moving you into kind of our lead to cash ecosystem. And here's how we're going to do it. It will be coordinated. We're going to all work together on this. We are a team. Equifax and you, acquired company, are a team. We are going to be transparent about it. Who here loves being left in the dark about what your company is doing, what's it doing, when it's doing it? Nobody. It's a terrible experience for everybody. So we're going to be transparent about the process. We're going to be accountable for making sure that everything is communicated, planned, and prepared for properly. We're going to offer a warm welcome, and we're going to provide ongoing support. And this was a game changer when we did it, because it starts off the conversation not as, hey, you're being absorbed into the board machine, whether you like it or not, so just get in line. It's, hey, we're going to work together on this. We're going to create a positive experience for everybody. And this was critical as part of that, because we are all humans and they may be nervous. If you're in billings, a billing support, and you're here that's moving to Equifax, you may be nervous. Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be able to learn this new technology? Like, what's this going to mean for me? They're nervous and they're scared. And you need to make sure that they feel supported and understood in all of that. So let's say your company did an acquisition. What are you going to do about it? Make it a team effort, right? And create a culture of inclusion, accountability, and respect. So one of the most interesting things that I'm sure they'll find within Salesforce is that people think data is easy. I did before I got involved in it. I'm like, well, it's just like data. It's just fields and, in a spreadsheet. Like, you just take the data and then you just put it in the other system. If you don't have a field there, then you just add a field and it's fine. Like, no, it is way more complicated than that. And I have massive respect for everyone who manages data. We have a whole team that just manages data at our company because of how complex it is. So I have a lot of respect for them. And it's very important that throughout the lead to cash ecosystem, you give everyone else that same level of respect, because you don't know what it takes for them to make a change. People joke like, well, can't you just add a field? It's never as easy as adding a field. It's not about the physical work. I could click create field in Salesforce and give you one in 30 seconds, but it's everything else that ties into that people don't understand. So if you don't like it when people kind of dismiss or, poo-poo your own work, don't do it to other people when you're kind of working on this. The other thing to keep in mind, lead to cash is a chain. You break one piece and everything falls apart. So a lot of our conversations were around doing this as a team and cohesive. Because let's say you have a lead come in to the old company system, but the sales team is working in the new system, but then operations is working in the old system and the billing is done in the new system. Now all of a sudden you're having to manually enter things in multiple places because you broke the chain, versus having a clean process flow where everything flows through and everything goes smoothly. The other important thing is make sure that leadership understands the importance and value of this work. Support from the top is critical. You need the time to do it right. You need buy-in from leadership on both sides of the importance of doing it right. And you need to make sure that it's prioritized and that people understand that they need to get on board with this. And typically we find about 6 months is the right amount of time to do this work. And I'll kind of walk you through how we've done it. Here's my secret sauce. Not going to gatekeep here because everyone likes to talk about gatekeeping. You do a workshop so that you know what you're trying to do, and then you come up with a project plan to do it. Workshop, let's start with that. So this is kind of the vision statement that we use. So we're going to map out the current state, map it to future states so that we can successfully complete the migration. And typically what I find is breaking it down into 3 phases lets everyone have kind of focused conversations that all kind of tie together. So you start with lead to contract, which is marketing, sales teams. Then you move to onboarding or implementations, which is typically more of your operations teams. And then service is your customer care teams. So that's kind of, think of it as the customer lifecycle, right? They want to buy your service, they start using your service, and then they need help with your service. So coming out of it, you kind of want two things. What are the team doing now? And what's a successful migration going to look like? And this is where that teamwork comes in. It's not, here's what we do it. It's, okay, how do you do things? How do we map that to the way we do things? And then what's our target date that we can successfully meet? So at the end of this presentation, which I'm happy to share with you, I have a template MnA workshop planning, and it kind of includes the vision statement, the workshop dates, the workshop attendees that I typically would invite to it, and some more details around it that I'm happy to share with people. Sometimes you attend these and they say, oh, we have resources, and whether you use them or not, it just makes me feel better that it's out there, that hypothetically people could use it. So part of that workshop, you also do a tech stack overview, right? Because you want to understand what you're moving from and what are you moving to. So this is where you do that mapping. Let's say they used HubSpot for marketing automation. You use Marketing Cloud. What's that translation going to look like? What's their CRM look like? There was one acquisition where they were using this tool called Prospector, which had like an account name and then a comment section that just was notes from the beginning of time of when they started working with that company. And that was kind of the extent of their CRM. So from the migration perspective, it was fairly simple. We've had others where they have automations built within the tool that will feed data from marketing to sales to onboarding so that everything flows seamlessly. Those ones are a little bit trickier. Kind of one fun thing to keep in mind is that typically people think of the number of employees as driving the complexity of the migration, but it's really about how they use their tools. Because if you have 3 people, but you have automation built entirely from end to end with multiple API connections, potentially data cloud connection, things like that in place, it's going to be a lot harder to just lift and shift that versus if they had 1,000 employees, but their CRM was a gray screen with an account name and a comments box that they just added to. So it's kind of important to keep in mind that setting expectations isn't the size of the deal. The employee count doesn't dictate the complexity of the work. It's how they use the tools within their tech stack. So this is a list of some common workshop attendees. One of the things that I found is when I initially was thinking about this, I was like, okay, well, we need to do a Salesforce migration. So I need to find my CRM people and we'll do it together. But then going back to my earlier comments about it, lead to cash being a chain, I realized that I needed to build alliances with a whole lot of different groups to be in alignment on it. So these are the types of people that I built those relationships with and included them in the workshop. So we would lock ourselves in a room for 2 days and just map out end-to-end state for the acquired company and just get it all process mapped. And it really gave everyone a chance to feel heard, validated, understood, so that we knew exactly what we were working with. So it was a long 2 days, but it was a very productive 2 days. I'm going to check the chat really quick, see if there's any comments. Okay. Oh, please elaborate ETL. Great. So from the workshop outline, like I said, we started with lead to service. And here's are some of the common questions that we were talking about. Do you have web to case in place? Do you have web to lead? What type of marketing automation platform are you using? How do you manage the sales, contracts, onboarding, service? So that you understand how the team is using the tools and what are the connection points between them so that you can develop a full process map for current state and map it to future state. One of the other things to keep in mind is that the baseline to all of this is account and product data. We talk a lot about data and making sure that you have the account data and the product data structured to meet their needs. And we'll talk more about that later on. So as part of the workshop, you want to kind of find power users for each of those team members to include in it. So you earn their trust by understanding their feelings and understanding their needs. They may be really nervous. But if you understand their needs, they'll feel less nervous. So you can set a positive tone because, like I mentioned earlier, there are two ways this can go. It could be like pulling teeth, where you're not getting the information you need, you don't get the support that you need, you don't get the testing support that you need, and it's like your enemies. You're not in it together. But if you listen, understand, and are on their side, they'll be partners and it'll make the whole process go smoother. There was one acquisition that we did where we had 3 months to do the entire process. And it's because we bought a portion of a company and they were moving to a new Salesforce org at the beginning of the year. So we had October, November, and December to do this entire process. And it was a true test of, does this workshop and project plan actually work? Because with the support of them and making them feel like partners in the process, we were able to make it work. And it was, one, a huge relief, and two, a sign that empathy, kindness, stopping things from becoming things are really valuable and actually do work in the real world. So Paul had a question around moving the acquirer to the acquired or a new org. Typically, what our company has done is taken the acquired kind of lead to cash structure and moved it into our structure. I understand that there may be use cases where you keep the org separate for one reason or another and use a tool to combine the data outside of that. I do not have any experience with that. So I think it's important to understand the business goals and then structure this approach to that. So once you're kind of through with the workshop, go live checklist is a plan for success. So you have 3 goals. There's 7 project components, which I will cover shortly. And I had weekly meetings. It was just 30 minutes. And I would call it the go live checklist meeting. And I think I had like 60 or 70 people on there by the end, because as we went through each acquisition, we would find more teams that were impacted and would include them in the process. So I just had an Excel sheet that kept growing with team members. So this is where you can have that open forum, stop things from becoming things. And then this is also where we could kind of provide high level reporting to leadership, because the way we summarized it, we had our current stage and then the components. So this is a project plan that is also, I publicly share. So there's planning, design, development, delivery, post live support, and we're at the retroactive state. So that makes it very easy to say, hey, here's where we're at in this MnA process. And then below that, you can see the 7 components, which I'll cover in more detail as we go. This ultimately led into a project plan where you can kind of keep track of go live dates, the tech stack. I included a spot for relevant documents. And then for each of the components, you can kind of track your percentage completion as part of that. So what are the project components? First one is the account. As we all know, account names can differ slightly. You may have all caps, you may have all lowercase. Do you have a dash in Walmart, or do you spell it as one word? And the goal is to look at the acquired company and your company and make sure that you're speaking the same language, because it makes data mapping, process mapping a lot easier if you're all kind of speaking the same language. So I know that there's different tools that don't necessarily require you to fully rationalize account data. We use a account mastering tool, so that's where we kind of would feed that and do that rationalization within that as part of the process. So that way everyone is speaking the same language, because you don't want to have to trace Wal-Mart Inc. to Walmart in all caps Inc. in this tool that's different from that tool. So kind of having that consistent name and ID, make sure that you're building from the same foundation. From the product mastering perspective, you want to make sure that sales knows how to sell, pricing knows how to price, operations can implement, and billing knows how to bill. So this is another one of those situations where you want to make sure that you have a solid foundation and a solid product structure that can feed kind of the whole lead to cash ecosystem. So data migration. So this is where you extract, transform, and load ETL, the data from the acquired company into your CRM. System configuration is where you pick up on all the CRM changes. We had one situation where on the contract, they had a service level agreement that data element was captured by our contract team, but they needed to see it visible on the case to drive some logic within that. So we had to implement a new field for them so that they could accomplish that. Picklist values are always kind of the go-to. We had another company that tracked which franchise an account supported. So it may be, Sam's Best Company Inc., but I may franchise Burger King, Taco Bell, and McDonald's, and they structured their approach, based on that. So we had to figure out a way to represent that information for them. And obviously there's changes to the page layout, profiles, permission sets, what type of API connections do they need to make so that the CRM is ready for them to do that. From the sales user perspective, a lot of it is just listening. Sales people like to sell, so administrative changes can be hard for them, but making sure that they feel supported doing this change is critical because they're the ones that work daily with your customers. And if they don't see the future vision and can't communicate it or are just frustrated by the tools, it's not going to work well. One of the initial questions we always get is how do we get a combined view of the customer? And that way you can better enable the cross collaboration and the cross-selling goals that you're trying to achieve. So you want to make sure that they have the right access, make sure that they understand what's changing and why, and most importantly, make sure that they have comprehensive training and ongoing support post go live, because they're the ones communicating that message to your customers. You want to make sure that they're supported and ready to go. Service users, same thing. They're the ones that talk daily with your customers and are going to be the ones hearing about the frustration if a bill isn't right or concerns about what this means for them, different security concerns, contracting concerns. They're kind of the front line. So you want to make sure that they have, again, all the support and care that they need to be able to do their job, to understand what's changing, and make sure that they have all the appropriate support. So for us, we would typically move their sales and customer service teams into Salesforce. And we would always make sure that we had training, hypercare immediately after so that they were prepared and ready for it, because we want them to be able to focus on serving the customer, not trying to figure out where XYZ piece of information is. And that's why I split it out. It's each user group kind of has unique needs. And I wanted to make sure that both sales and service users got attention and care during this process. So overall training and post-live support. And this goes kind of across the lead to cash ecosystem because our goal was always to make that move at the same time. So that, again, if you think about that chain, you don't want to break the chain within the process. So there was a lot of communication across the company leading up to the go live date, what to expect, when to expect it, give them full training at the time of go live, and then look at it post go live to review what went well and what could have improved. And those learnings were critical because it helped us make it better each time. I know it said at the beginning, but I have lost track of how many of these acquisitions I did since we acquired Salesforce. It's over 10. I can't even name all the companies anymore because I've done so many. But each time the process has gotten better and better because we've listened and learned from it. Paul, going back to your question, yes. We always require them to review and clean up their data before we do anything. And we held them highly accountable for making sure that if they're asking for something that we don't currently have a home for, do you really need it? or do you just like to have it? People, it's interesting. The piece of data that I always got the most questions and most resistance about is activity information, emails, meetings. Well, I'm going to lose all my notes from the account. Yes, it's not something that we migrate just from the level of complexity, volume of data, and business value that we get out of it. And that was always the activity. Yeah, and huge pick lists. Yes. So we would also make them think about, okay, what do you really need in that pick list and how was it used? So typically what we do is get a full extract of data and then just look at it. What values are being used, what isn't being used. And then we would do field by field level mapping of where they can find that data in the future. And it was a painful exercise, but there was never a question around, wait a second, where did that piece of data go? Because we had it all mapped out. But we made sure, do you really need this? I think there's one acquisition where we exported the number of fields, and I think it went to, I think they had over 200 fields. And a lot of them were like, oh, well, they just asked for it, so we added the field. But nobody's using it. So it just kind of sat out there. So we had a lot of conversations around data quality issues. And the biggest one, I think, was a transition to operational support. So when the acquisition was happening, we did a lot of handholding, and it was a lot of making sure that people had the support that they needed to do that. But we always wanted to make sure that we could transition them to our standard operational support at the end of it. We have a Salesforce support team. We have a group of people who handle those day-to-day requests. We made sure that they understood how to get that team and who to escalate it to if something came in. And we always made sure to transition to them. Typically because otherwise they would keep coming to me, and I was typically having to move to the next one. So it's time for me to move on. Going to the question around legacy data, yes, we have a secure storage system. So we would typically extract the data and store the full set of legacy data for backup purposes. The one area that's really it, and a lot of times nobody would touch it. They say, we need a full extract. So we would do the full extract and then nobody touches it ever. But the one area that has where somebody actually did access it is case information. There's a customer who said, we did this, you did this for us a year ago and you screwed it up. No, we didn't. We went back to the case information and showed them the email from the customer saying, yep, this is good. You actually did the thing that you told us you did. So that's kind of the one case where that legacy data actually saved us a big headache because we were able to provide proof to the client that, nope, we didn't screw up. You signed off on it. So that's kind of typically how we handle some of that legacy information. And yes, Charles, going back to your point, we also would do the same and do a cleanup review of our own information. That's where the cross collaboration is important because they may point out things where we're inefficient in the way we capture or collect that information, and using it as an opportunity for us to improve our own procedures so that we're in it together. If they have a different Salesforce data model, so the question is, what if the acquiring company has a different Salesforce data model? Vertical M&A. I think what I found is even if a company has a radically different data model, they all, sorry, I want to make sure that I can answer this right because I get where you're going. Even if there's a radically different data model, it still generally is the same type of data, right? You may have a custom object where you're storing data about an account, but it's still account information. We capture contract information. So a lot of it is doing the mapping and figuring out the right home for it. I think the biggest struggle that we would have from the data model perspective is kind of what I call operational data. So there's different things like, oh, hey, what file format did this customer use to send us information? Or, oh, does this customer let us, do they have like a specific SLA? And that's where it gets a lot harder, because that may be not information that we can put into our CRM. And that's where having that good partners in operations, in finance, in fulfillment platforms, and making sure that you have the right home for data is so critical. And that's also where you have to have hard conversations around, are you really using this information, or does it just make you feel better to have it? Because companies tend to pack around information that may not be relevant. Well, 5 years ago, we added this field and we populated it because it was really important. And then we haven't updated it since. Okay, so you're asking me to migrate something that you haven't updated in 5 years because it's critically important. No offense, but how critically important is it if you haven't touched it in 5 years? And yes, Paul, security models can be very, very tricky. And that's typically why we don't do activity information, because we don't have a way of knowing what people have put in there or are sharing in there. They may be sending emails with highly sensitive information. And from the security perspective, it just wasn't a risk that we were willing to take. We take security very seriously and don't need to import someone's email with 10 social security numbers in it into our org that's widely accessible. We just don't want to do that. So understanding that security models is critically important. That also goes where user profiles and permission sets are so important, because you want to make sure you have the right security model in place to make sure that information that needs to be restricted is properly restricted. So that's where looking at it as a full implementation is so important. What data do you really need? Who should access that information? And what do you need to do with it once it's in the tool? So what next? So I've kind of done a little bit of Q&A, but I might do this slide and then I'll go back to that. So MnA. I think I wrote it best, so I'm just going to read it. I hate it when people read from slides, but in this case, you have the opportunity to help your company and your fellow employees navigate a complex, hard process to make sure your company meets its goals while humanely helping people through a massive change management process. So here's the 3 things to remember. Workshop sets the stage. Project plan delivers it to completion. Post-go live support ensures ongoing success. And then I have a link to the workshop template and project plan template. And then you can also connect with me. And I honestly say this, if you need help or just someone a shoulder to cry on about how complicated MnA is, I'm here for you, because it's vitally important. And I want everyone to be successful with it, because I know how important and impactful it is. I also have a blog about Salesforce. One of my personal favorite posts I did is how Frozen songs can help you be better at MnA. My daughters were obsessed with Frozen, and my youngest had sleep apnea, so she just never slept well while we were figuring that out. And I was up at 2 a.m. and I thought, you know what? This would be fun, because we had been listening to Frozen earlier that day. So I wrote one, and that's my little teaser for coming to check it out. It's fun. Very silly, but fun. So with that out of the way, I'm happy to take any other questions or have a live conversation with if anyone has something that they'd like to share or a question for me. Why have I lost my mouse? There it is. Security tools. Are there any security tools to scan the security model? Yes. I know that I don't know which ones we all use, but we have some internal tools that look for sensitive information, and we'll kind of pull it out and block it internally. Oh, Janine, you literally used Elsa in a presentation about M&A before. That makes me very, very happy. I'm very curious what context that was in, though. Was it about letting go of the old and being welcoming to the new, or was it going into the unknown bravely, or was it Anna choosing to do the next right thing?
Janine, we can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Every new meeting this week. It was literally Elsa saying "Let it go," and sometimes you have to say to the CEO of a giant company that they have to let it go, and that's not a comfortable position to be in when they hate consultants. Yeah, I said that.
Well, the whole M&A is just, they're losing tools that they may have used for years. They're using data that they've been hoarding for years that they really think is going to like game change for them, even though they haven't looked at it or updated it in 10 years. I would like get so nervous anytime I had to have those conversations. I'd like want to throw up whenever I had to talk about activities because people would get so upset at me. And then I realized that you can't always give people what they want. And it's for the best in the long run. And you just kind of have to be confident in your decisions. Articulate the reasoning behind it, but also be confident in it at the same time.
So Sam, to have a live dialogue on the activity piece, because like to me, it's not just M&A. It is when you do org split. It is when you're doing org migration. Given like the last 9 months of technology evolution, that you can unify profiles from the legacy and the target org in data cloud, given you can bring unstructured data that maintains reference to the legacy org ID that you can technically aggregate. Are you planning on any experiments, or are you putting this in practice to see if you can actually act on historical activities? Not by bringing that data into CRM, but instead using middleware technologies.
So that's an interesting question. I have not had to do an M&A migration since summer of 20. I think I did 5 in a year and a half, and I think I finished the summer of 24. Or was it the summer of 23? I don't know. It's been so much has changed. I guess let me answer your question simply. My acquisitions were done prior to the explosion and introduction of some new tools like that. So our focus was just on export and save versus looking at leveraging it in unique ways. But I would be very interested in exploring that next time we have to go through this.
Just to share, so we are internally experimenting with using a combination of archiving because it's cheaper and it's meant to be there for a long time, data cloud, and Agentforce to identify how we can actually unify data at a much lower cost point. And if we are not going to use it, it doesn't make sense to bring it in. We may just retain it for compliance purposes. So not enough progress to be able to talk about it yet, but like as a business stakeholder, I'm trying to balance how do we not throw away what may be useful, but how do we leverage what could be useful in customer facing more expensive environments. So I may reach out to you to brainstorm behind the
Yeah.
scene.
Like I said, I'm always happy to talk M&A. Charles asked, did you find it easier or harder to acquire smaller versus larger companies? And honestly, it's strictly based on how complicated and automated their tech stacks were. Because the level of complexity and the level of automation within those increased my development and planning time associated with that because we had to build more technology to replicate some of that automation. So it's, from the empathy psychology point of view, I think larger was a little bit easier because you kind of worked with a broader group of people, um, versus some of the smaller acquisitions where you're kind of feel like you having to tap the same people all the time. I was on the phone call daily for 6 months with one person who was trying to do their day job and also help me with everything because they kind of did a little bit of everything. And it was just a lot for them because they're really trying their best to give you everything that you need, but they're also trying to do their day job on top of it. And it was a lot. So I think a larger, but not like so large where it's just overwhelming the number of people that you have to work with, where it's just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. So like I would say mid-size. Mid-size is best because there's enough diversity of responsibilities that you get to work with a broader group of people. And it's not necessarily like, hey, we have 4 people in our company and I'm responsible for the entire lead to cash. And now I have to give you everything that's needed to support this. We're also trying to run lead to cash for the company. So that was an interesting question. It wasn't one that I had thought about before. Thank you.
I'm trying to scan if there are any other unanswered questions, and I'm not surprised that you can talk about this for a long time because it's a big topic. Any other questions people want to ask by coming off mute before we move to wrap up? So in that case, I want to say, Sam, thank you so much for joining us today and providing a broad set of perspectives, the human element, organization, prioritization, communication, data architecture. This is exactly what we hope these sessions to be because data matters to all of us, regardless of role, regardless of industry, company size, or product mix. I want to share the email address of our community leaders if you want to present because you're passionate about the topic, just like Sam clearly is. Or if you're struggling with something and you wish there was someone who has been through that journey before and you want to hear what worked and what didn't work for them, this is what we want this community to be all about. With that, I want to say thank you, all of you again, our speakers, our participants, live and virtual, and we look forward to seeing you at a future session.